Good afternoon, everyone who's joining us live today on this International Women's Day. Maya Angelou said, each time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it possibly, without claiming it, she stands up for all women. This is an apt quote to start today's segment commemorating International Women's Day 2022 as we open up the discussion on breaking the biases that women face on a daily basis to bring us closer to a diverse, equitable, and inclusive world where differences is valued and celebrated. At RYTHM Foundation, we believe that the first step towards change is education and awareness, and therefore we wanted to bring together advocates for women empowerment to facilitate discussion on how we can create gender equal world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. And here with me that I have two powerful women, I think, that who have been advocates in their own rights, and they have been involved in the grassroots level of work. And I would like to introduce them now. Our first speaker, Rozana Iza, Executive Director of Sisters in Islam. Rozana Iza joined the Malaysian women's rights movements in 1999 to address violence against women. She currently serves as the Executive Director for Sisters in Islam, a Malaysian NGO working to advance women's rights within the framework of Islam, human rights, constitutional guarantees, and their lived realities. Welcome, Rozana, to this FB Live.
Thank you, Datin Sri.
Our speaker is Bala, Lead Consultant on Child Protection and Gender Consultancy. Amy is a child protection specialist and the lead consultant on child protection in ENGENDER Consultancy, who is committed to advocating child rights and protection through awareness and education. Through her 40 years of experience and her work with the Department of Social Welfare Malaysia includes handling issues on the ground. Thank you, Amy Bala, for joining us today on this Facebook Live. And
thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And she's also the Vice President of the Malaysian Association of Social Workers and has conducted workshops on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and has also served as an advisor at the Children's Court in Selangor. So I look forward to this dialogue today with both of you. We have a lot of questions lined up, and I'm sure later part of the this event, we are also going to get more questions coming from, our audience who are joining us today live. The theme for IWD this year is breaking bias and gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. I would like to ask both of you, what does this mean to you? Rozana, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Datin Sri Umayal, and thank you to RYTHM Foundation for having me again this year for International Women's Day. Yes, it's talking about gender equality is something that, the women's groups in Malaysia and around the world have been fighting for or struggling for to make it a reality in the long term. And I think one of the difficulties that we have is, how do we actually ensure that, these equality is actually that we actually have them recognized in our laws, yeah. And at the same time, how do we also ensure that, you know, these gender equality is also manifested in our real life? And one of the things that, in my experience with the Joint Action Group for Gender Equality, it's actually very important to have, you know, visibility and certainty in our laws that says, you know, men and women, that there should be no discrimination between genders, right? And we have this guaranteed in our federal constitution. But somehow or other, it's still not enough, you know, for us to have this realized in our laws and policies and our lived realities, and which is why it's actually important to have the gender equality bill to kind of spell out, you know, what does this equality look like for us, for women. And at the same time, when we're talking about gender equality, you know, we're also talking about this thing about breaking the bias. And breaking the bias, really, I mean, gender equality and discrimination is kind of like two sides of a coin, you know. Like, in order to ensure gender equality, you also have to make sure that there's non-discrimination. And definitely, when it comes to the issue of non-discrimination, it really means that, you know, we've got to look at what are our prejudices, our stereotypes that we, you know, see in real life, and how do we actually uh, break those down, or do away with them. What is it that we have to change in our society, in our mindset, in our culture, so that more and more, you know, this gender equality is more felt and becomes more visible, and becomes more of a practice in our daily life. So that's it in a nutshell. That's what it is to me.
Thank you. I mean, I'll come back. You know, I was taking some notes down while you were talking. Amy, Bala, over to you, please. What does this mean to you?
To me, okay, as a social worker,
Yes.
and also as an advocate for early childhood, I see a lot of discrimination between the two genders. Sorry. When we talk about gender, a lot of people think that it's only the women. Actually, it's not. It's boys and girls, men and women. Or however I should say, a lot of people tend to separate the two, and they give certain categorization to one against the other. Okay? So when you look at social issues, social problems, and you look at how children are parented, the boys are looked differently from the girls. Of course, biologically they're different, but again, if they look at boys, say the males have different strengths, so they should be nurtured differently, get different priority, you know, and then the girls should be subservient. You may think that this is something before, but it's not. It still exists. So when this is perpetuated from young, it is something that it becomes permanent, and you will get not only the children but also those around them looking at this as something that is right, but it's not. It creates more bias, and then this perception actually leads on as they grow up to think themselves so different, so much stronger. They have power. They become judgmental. They become aggressive, and instead of being partners, and some of this actually leads on even to marriage. So when they choose a partner or they get into a partnership of marriage, they always think that they have power over the other. And usually the male thinks he has the power over the female because that's his upbringing. Okay, so this biasness actually is perpetuated in different layers, not only in the B40 community, not only the middle managers, but even right on top. So they think that, oh, the men are born to be leaders and the women are born to be followers. So that's not right, you know, because everyone has their strengths. And it is good that we want to break this bias, because when you break, then only you can actually look at equality. You can look at how the next generation can actually be a better generation than what it is now.
Okay, because I actually have a question that's basically related, because when you're talking about how we bring up the boys and girls, but because I've started with this question, I'm going to throw again is that when we are talking about the bias, basically, and we know, because even among women, that the discussion usually is the stereotypes that, the very common bias is in the workplace, the women face in the workplace. And at the same time, if you stand up, right, and if you try to break that bias, you are given a name as, oh, you shouldn't come out so fierce, you shouldn't come out strong, because you are a woman, and therefore you should be very, you should be very mild about it. You should be gentle and graceful, and take this, in an elegant manner. Do you both believe in that?
No, definitely.
Amy, Bala, please.
Definitely not. Okay, if you're looking at biases at the workplace,
Yeah.
it's just at the service sector. You look at the service sector, it is dominated by women, whether it's teachers or nurses or even social workers.
Yes.
Because the general understanding is the women is soft, gentle, more caring, and should be able to do carry out or implement or provide services more professionally than the men. Okay?
Right.
But it's not always true. We have wonderful male teachers who are as nurturing as the female teachers.
Yeah.
We have very good male nurses who, in fact, are able to, care for the patient just as well as a female staff. But somehow, a lot of them assume and have this understanding that women are there to be second layer or middle managers, but it's only the men who can be top management. And if you cut across, you will still see a very small percentage of women will be in the management, it will be the men. And they'll give you reasons like, oh, the man is able to work longer hours, the men will not take unnecessary leave, the women will be taking maternity leave, they will take leave every month for 5 days, they will take leave, the men will not do all this. So the men are more productive, But at the end of the day, if you actually analyze, you will see that the managers are giving instructions, they are monitoring, but the actual productive work is actually being done by the women.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's true. That is true. I think women are also, because we are very detailed, I think, in that way. I mean, I see a lot of women. I think that's why, in the sense that, but it has become a mindset, that, basically it has become a mindset. So I think what we need to do is, how do we break these barriers of saying, like, again, when I told you that, they think that when you want to break the bias in a workplace, you do it gently, do you do it gracefully? I mean, why do we have to? I mean, if we believe in something that's not right, why can't we just raise it? Does that have to be like a Cinderella or a Snow White who's coming there and stating?
No. You can be gentle but firm.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah,
you see, you don't have to shout. You don't have to shout to put a point across.
No, I'm not.
You can be slow. You can take your time, but be firm, be assertive. That's all. But most important is, you should be aware of what you're fighting for. You should know your facts. Sometimes, when you are not very sure, but you think you are sure, that's when you get into problems. You must be not only confident, but you must really be informative as well before you want to raise an issue.
True. Rozana, what's your opinion on this?
Definitely, I think I agree with Amy, especially on the point about being assertive. And I think this is where there's always that misunderstanding or misconception, right?
Yeah.
If, a woman, like if a man is being assertive, he's seen as confident.
Yes.
It's seen as like, all these positive attributes, confidence, strength. But if women are assertive, they are seen as aggressive.
Yes.
The negative connotations of the behavior which a man does, so that's where the biasness is actually. Yeah. And I think in any work situation, I mean, I agree with Amy. I mean, we all need to know our facts. We need to know what is it that we want to propose. We're not just, raising, issues and problems, but we should come up with also possible recommendations and proposals, like we are all here together to solve the problem, right?
Yes.
But this is where, I think for us, it's really that mindset about, when women speak up, it should be taken just the way as how, men are speaking up. It's like, oh, she's making a good point. Therefore, let's talk about it and discuss it rather than, why is she being pushy about this? Even if you disagree, and disagreement is, something that we all should get used to in the workplace, right? Because we're dealing with different people with different opinions. And so if there is a disagreement, that disagreement or conflict should be dealt with in a way that's still respectful of one another, rather than saying, it's like, oh, every time I say something, she's going to disagree with me, and she's disagreeing with me on purpose. Or for the sake of disagreeing with me, But so all these biasness that we really have in our minds about, the positive attributes for men and the negative attributes towards women, when actually their behaviors are the same, they're just doing the same thing. So this is where we need to really check ourselves and ask, like, why am I thinking this way? Why am I seeing her saying this as aggressive when actually when he says it, he's just coming across as very confident and he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, because correct. And you need to be open. The most important thing is you need to be open. You need to accept the point of the other person if they can justify what they are saying.
Yeah.
And I think in any workplace there needs to be safe space. You need to give enough opportunities for the other person to voice their opinion, and if it is objective, if it is something for the betterment of the project, betterment of the industry, it should be acceptable. You shouldn't straight away say she's opinionated because she's a woman. It's not necessary. But of course, if she speaks without effect, as we just said, then there's a problem. But if she's confident, she knows, and it's all technically correct, then I think there should not be any judgment. It should be accepted.
I like the way you both come across, because your answer in the sense for this is not emotional in the sense. So basically we are saying don't be emotional even to get the point across, because in a workplace, you be professional. Professional means you have to state your facts, give why are you even asking for this change to be initiated. Because I was listening to someone talking about how, this biases, that exist in the workplace, and they are talking about how, you can have trainings, you can have this peer-to-peer sessions, you can have programs, we can have all this. But if the fundamental part is the mindset,
Correct.
which is kind of, it's in us, it's already stuck to us from the, how Amy said, from the time we are young, how they say that, boys, like I always say this, how, in the Asian houses, especially when a visitor comes, you inevitably get a girl to serve the drink and the water, but you never ask the boy to do that. So I think it starts, I truly believe, because even with these discussions, I truly believe until and unless the fundamentals, which is the mindset of every individual, they take an effort to change. So I also heard someone today say that International Women's Day is about internalizing the spirit of it. Right? So it's actually, going like in inwards, really believing this is not just for the women, but this is for the millions of the, men, the children, the community around us, for us to break the bias. Now,
Right.
talking about this, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes.
If you're saying internalizing actually takes time. It doesn't happen in one day.
No.
So if the child who's observing certain values, observing behavior, and internalizing it, over time, it will become his implicit bias. So if he's growing up in an environment where there are a lot of racial slur, religious comments, comments about other people, then the minute the child looks at someone, he will look at that person in a racial context, in a religious context, in a behavioral context. He's not going to look at that particular person as a person who has something to offer to him. He doesn't, or another person, automatically happens like that.
Yes.
So what we are saying is, for this internalization, children as they're growing up actually need extremely good role models who actually walk their talk as well. A person can advocate about rights outside the home. They can come home and do something else. So, both of that two actually goes together. You have to be a good role model, but you need to walk your talk. Even if you're in the workplace, it's the same. So if you have the management who talks about equality, progress, we are a team, the success of this industry belongs to us, but at the end of the day, I'm not walking the talk.
True.
Then there's a problem.
Yep. I think you hit the nail, Amy. I think it's very true because we can all sit and talk. I always say until the sun turns pink, we can all sit and discuss here and talk. But if we all individually truly don't believe this change needs to happen and we ourselves walk that talk, then none of this will happen, right? So I think even in our foundation, all the work that we do, and we believe, this is again a fundamental question that's coming to both of you, that we believe that breaking the cycle of biases, stereotypes, discrimination needs to start as early as childhood. That means education begins at home, And what do you think that are some ways that people can either, they should do with their children from the time they're young? I mean, boys and girls. Rozana?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and it's something that even as a mother, I wish I had paid more attention to it when I had my kids, the first time, and so one of the things that I find, because my children are grown up now, they're amazing kids, but I also look back in terms like, what are the things that I wish I had known, when I had them. And I think this part of, the caring, the nurturing and all of that, comes with the territory. But this whole thing about, how you are in all your relationships, how you actually manifest that, your relationship with, your partner, your husband, with your parents and people around you, they're going to be mindful and take example from that. So, for example, I would say, like, how fathers and mothers talk to one another.
Yes.
Are you talking to one another, or is one of you giving an instruction?
Yes.
So all the things that actually, Amy had mentioned right at the beginning about dynamics of relationships,
yes.
Those I think are the fundamental things that really, gives the picture of whether the dynamics in the relationship are healthy ones, or whether, it's one of authority, and that authority comes from one party. And then it's given, what do you call this, authority is somebody is being authoritative to another person. And I think when children see their own parents as being, very that they have a good relationship, they are very conversational with one another, that all these words come out of their mouth, like, can you help me do something please, and the thank yous, there will be all that appreciation, that just that thing about, oh, my father appreciates my mother and everything that she does. And likewise, right? Whereas if one party is just giving instructions, go and do this, go and do that, then you will already establish from the onset, not only in terms of what you are saying, but the tone of the voice that you're using, that, authoritative relationships are the way to go, and the authoritative ones are usually the men over the women. So I think that those for me, now that when I think about, my children and what I hope I have imparted to them is really that whole thing about that sense of a relationship that's of partnership rather than somebody more superior and somebody else is inferior, and somebody is more authoritative than the other. I think that's the crux of it, because as babies learn, you learn actually from the voices that you hear. Yeah, so that for me is the fundamental.
Yep.
Yeah, I like to go back to the word partnership. Okay. When I was growing up, my mom was a homemaker and my father was, of course, a person of bread, brought the bread home, gave it the same. Okay. But there was a partnership in the sense that she cared for the home, cared for us. We were lucky to go home to hot meals, a clean house, but she was not able to guide us academically. Okay, look at our homework and make sure study. My father was the one who ensured that boys nor girls, and he kept consistently, there were 3 boys and 2 girls. All 5 must excel. He has never told us that the girls must do, no, the girls from 5 is enough, you get married. Never. I never heard that as I was growing up. Okay, he ensured that all 5 of us, we had to do the best, and he always motivated us to go as high as we can. And I often heard him say this even to the neighbors, to everybody we meet. So there was no disparity. Even as I was growing up, I didn't share any discrimination of boys and girls. When I got married and had my 2 children, a boy and a girl, I was a career mom, and being a social worker, it's not 8 to 4. Sometimes I have to come back much later. Fortunately, my husband was in the private sector, so he could adjust some of his time. And we had from very early house rules where all of us had to play a role. It's not just boy does the hard work and my daughter does only the sweeping. No. So somehow house rules helped us to work as a team right from the beginning. No selective jobs unless they decide among themselves. Sometimes they will exchange chores, if they don't want to do. That's their choice. So there was a lot of teamwork, and children were accountable for chores given. So this is how we grow up with this partnership. And today I can tell you, my son was married. I can see this partnership continuing even in his life, He can do all the household chores and he helps because both are working. So you cannot go back to 100 years ago and say, I'm a man, I'm not going to wash dishes. I'm a man, I'm not going to change the diaper. You can't do that. And when you talk about partnership, when you say parent, it's not just mom or dad. It's both of them together is what is called a parent. So if you decide to have a family, if you decide you want to have children, if you decide you want to bring them up, then you need to be focused, you need to concentrate, you need to make sure that right from the beginning, both of you think alike in how you want to run your family. You have to discuss. It's not easy, but you have to discuss and also make certain decisions which will be the best for the children. Maybe for me, the benefit was as a social worker, I saw a lot of the other side of the society where people tend to suffer because they want to be stubborn about their relationship. They want to make certain decisions which is not compatible to both partners. So there were actually lessons learned for me as I was growing up in my marriage, or even as a mother. There were a lot of lessons I learned, and it helped me avoid the pitfalls. And when we went into doing parenting courses, that experience really helped. Because as you're just saying, you don't become an authoritative or authoritarian or a laissez-faire mother. It's not going to help. So you need to have boundaries, and you need to know where to push and pull. And that's really important. And a lot of parents don't realize that you also need to continuously upgrade your knowledge, because parenting is not the same now. Today, if I look at my grandkids, they're so technology savvy, and they are teaching me who are the superheroes and what can be done and all that. So it's totally a different kettle of fish, You cannot look at how my mother brought me up and how,
Yes.
No, it's very different. And if young parents don't face up to that, then that's where we have a lot of problems as well. So it's really very important to be open, to accept, and also to accept change. You cannot be stubborn about this is what an Indian mother should do and this is what a Malay father should do. It doesn't work that way anymore. It doesn't.
That's true. Yes, that's true. I think the trends have changed and how how we handle the children. I mean, like from how your parents and you today and your children and grandchildren, you can already see that basically it has evolved. I mean, we can't, even my time, just the Rotan comes out and you're like, okay, you're standing, at ease and, you're not saying anything. You're like, go and sit and study. You're doing that. But you really can't do that to the kids today because they keep asking you why, what, where, how, and then there's this Google which gives them, information that they need and information that they don't need.
They don't need.
Yeah, they don't need also. So
they don't need a lot of information.
Exactly. So it's a diarrhea in the sense as well, Google. So, they do get a lot of information and then they come out with an argument by themselves. And, and they start having all these conversations with you. So when we are talking about the young, of course, the other question I had was what are kind of habits and practices we can cultivate? But that's when I think Amy Bala went to explain a bit more on how this can be done, the partnership, the understanding between the two, and all that, in terms of teaching the value. Because it's like the children are also in a way is monkey see, monkey do,
Right.
Also watch the parents and they tend to, inevitably we tend to do what the parents are doing as well. And this is where we come. Do you think that sex education and conversation with the young about consent, body image, self-esteem, marriage and relationships, etc., has a role in achieving gender equality? Who's going to go first?
Maybe I'll go first.
Yes.
This part of the whole issue of bodily autonomy, I think, is very critical. It's very important, especially in light of what we have seen during the pandemic and the issue with the vaccination, right? And so we have come across cases and stories and questions that come to our Telenisa helpline, asking about, my husband does not want me to take up the vaccine. He thinks that the vaccine is unnecessary or it's not good for me as a mother, or because I'm pregnant and therefore it may affect the child and so on and so forth. But the mother herself is very aware because there's a lot of information going out, and she's aware of the necessity for vaccination, not only to protect herself but also inevitably to protect the other children around her, as well as the baby that she's carrying. And so that's why this whole issue of authority really needs to be dismantled. I can't speak for families of other ethnicities and religions, but definitely within the Muslim family, this whole issue of authority is still something that we're grasping to tackle, because a lot of rhetoric and the narrative that goes out accompanied by religious texts is that the husband is the head of the family, and therefore any decisions that he makes, the wife must follow and should not be disobedient to him. And if she is disobedient, then she runs this risk of being disobedient lah, and that he can actually take legal action if needs be against her. And so this was where we found our work really, really challenging during the pandemic, where we have to give that information to women to say that this body that this is your right. If nobody else really, ultimately, you will have to look after yourself and make the decision for yourself. And it may come to a point that the decision that you make, especially with regards to vaccination, may differ from what your husband is deciding for you. Yeah, and even before this whole issue of vaccination, that whole issue of, for example, the kind of contraception, that is being used in family planning. What else? The number of children, that the family, that the couple decides to have. Who is actually making all these decisions? So if a woman is not asserting, is not accepting the fact that she has autonomy over her own body and to say, no, enough, I've already had 3 babies in the last 3 years, 3 or 4 years, I need a break. It's coming from somewhere, because concurrent, consecutive pregnancies can take a toll on the health of the mother and the child as well in the long run.
Yes.
So you've got to really learn how to. Women have got to really learn how to look after themselves. They've got to get that knowledge, how they need to look after themselves, and then ensure that, the husband and the partner also understands that, if I don't look after myself, if you also are not making these decisions with me that support me, then in the long run, it's just going to be detrimental to the mother, to the wife, in the long term.
If I can add what Rozana is saying and link back to what we discussed earlier.
Yes.
You see, the home is the first school for the child.
Yes.
A girl or a boy, they learn to be confident, they learn to be assertive, they learn to make balanced decisions.
Yes.
However, they don't grow up forever they don't remain forever only in the home. They
Yes.
move on, they move to the neighbors, they move on, they go to school, they
Yes.
move on, they go to college, they move on, they see a total new world around them. And
Yes.
all these other influences are also going to have an impact on how this young person thinks, behaves, moves, and also makes decisions.
Yes.
So if you are saying that at the home, children are taught to respect each other. Children are taught to respect their bodies and also their siblings. Okay, but if you go to school, and in school, policy is not similar. The teachers don't reflect the same thing. Other friends don't say the same thing, and there is no similarity in values. Then there's a conflict again. So if you talk about schools, Rozana right in the beginning said about policies. All schools have safe policy. All schools have got CRC. All schools says child has a right. But in practice, is that the same? It's not. And you talk about sexual education. Children need to have health science class. They learn about sexuality, and we had so much of argument on even the term to use. Do we use reproductive health? Do we use sexuality education? Do we say sex education? I don't know why they're so hung up on the term when actually we want the right content to go to the children, so the children understand why it is important to look after their own bodies until they're ready. That's all we need to teach. But the school syllabus, the education department says they have it, but if you speak to pick a child at random, they'll say, no, we didn't. Either the teacher asked us to read the book, or the teacher did teach but didn't understand what she said. So if the continuum is not there, then you're going to end up having a lot of problems, and this biases is going to continue.
Yeah, so
and you have to write up as well. Rozana, because gender desk, gender ethnic studies, gender studies, but how much of it is actually in practice?
Really being imparted to the kids. Yeah, so I kind of, because Malaysia, I believe the strength of Malaysia is the multiracial, that we are. So that's why, we respect each other, because we don't put down one another's religion and their beliefs, because that's not up to you and up to, any of us to say for one another. We just respect, we keep that distance, we don't say anything, because that's how we have been living for years, because we are meant to respect one another. So can we use culture as an excuse to treat women differently? Because, that to me, that is something that, I'm talking in a general term. I'm not talking in the religious term, because sometimes they tend to use culture and religion as an excuse, to treat women differently, just as we would not accept custom or tradition as a rationale for discrimination against an ethnic group. Justification for discrimination against women based on culture should not be tolerated. I mean, that somebody was saying this today on International Women's Day, and it stuck to me that, it's very important, like especially in the Malaysian context, because, we are a multicultural society. So culture does change. It is important to take advantage of potential windows of opportunity to improve the situation of women and girls. So I think, is that why that one of the reasons, because of the culture and the religion, is why in schools today, like how Bala has stated that, we have so many subject matter, whether we are actually imparting it to the children because of they think, these are terms we shouldn't use, or this is a subject that should not be discussed in the open, even for us, when we did our Maharani program, it always been that very sensitive subject of, sexual education, right? So whether, we should just not discuss, put that in the cupboard, it's as if it's not part of who we are as a human race. It's rather we tell the children what is, like, for example, a good touch, a bad touch, and when, when do you actually, you talk about this and things like that openly, and instead of, I feel that it gets more worse when we close it and put it in a closet, and when we try to hide it, rather than we, open it up and everybody knows about it. Now, this is where it comes, when it comes to, for example, the, because of all this lack of all this in schools, we are talking about the anti-sexual harassment bill that was tabled in the parliament. Okay. And as we know, with the pandemic, all right. And why is that? Bala, you are on the ground. And as you know, domestic violence have tripled, quadrupled, okay, in Malaysia, and also, the sexual harassment in workplace and child marriages, okay, girls have, NST, I think, reported that out of 400 over students, about, 491 or something, about 450 of these girls left school to go and get married. Right. So, and what during the pandemic that's happening is fathers are just basically, literally, in a way, selling their daughters for child marriage, and so is this not an important thing right now, that the bill that has been tabled in the parliament, do you think that can we hope for in the future in relation to it, that this will make a difference?
Can I say something before she goes to the bill? I think you're putting too much of emphasis on teaching girls to respect their bodies. Yeah. It's equally important to teach the boys. The boys themselves, right from young. They too need to respect their bodies, and they need to respect the girls whom they meet, whether they are siblings, they are friends, they are peers, they are classmates. So this should actually be taught both ways. To me, coming to your sexual harassment, if a man is rude to a woman, why? If he was taught to be respectful at home, his own sisters, his neighbors, his cousins, he's not going to do that to another person. So all that teaching, and I don't know whether it is culture, because culture has a lot of positive elements.
Of course.
This is not. I think this is, sometimes it's perceptions, it's the way people think it should be done, but they're not even aware of what is the right thing to do. They don't know what they should do, and they think they know. That is the problem. And many of them don't know what they don't know, right? So they think this is how I must do, this is what I must teach my children. The girls should protect themselves. Boys, okay, even if they have somebody rapes them, they won't get pregnant. That's not the issue. This self-respect should be instituted to both sexes. And if we had, and we do it extensively, we don't need one sexual harassment bill. Okay, Rozana, over to you.
Bala, just a correction. When I was talking about the sexual education and all that, this is not just for girls. I'm talking equally to the boys, to our children. it's very important. So I agree with you totally. Yes, Rozana, please.
The anti-sexual harassment bill, one of the difficulties that we are getting is actually to have this anti-sexual harassment bill being taken up by private companies and for it to be applied at the workplace. There is resistance there because they think perhaps employers think that they would have to do a lot, and I think they just don't want to, perhaps maybe don't want to deal with the whole addressing this issue of sexual harassment. But I have to say, I mean, we talked a bit about culture. And I think there is something about addressing the culture in the workplace, which I think is very necessary and real. Because if the culture of the organization is such that, you are allowing for, rude jokes, to be said to women, or to be said to the employees, because it can also be said by women to men, right? So if somebody in a superior position is making all this, sexual jokes to the employees and making them feel uncomfortable, and he or she is not being reprimanded for making those comments, then that's already a culture in the organization to kind of like we accept this kind of behavior. So certain behaviors will be seen as, if you can get away with it, you will not be punished. So this kinds of culture within the organization actually is something that needs to be addressed. And this is why, women's groups last week were highlighting the fact that the anti-sexual harassment bill needs to be reviewed again by the Parliamentary Special Select Committee on Women and Children's Affairs and Social Development, because it is just not strong enough in dealing with that whole potential sexual harassment situation in the workplace. And one of it is this, that employers actually need to take on, organizational duties, making sure that the behaviors of harassment will not be tolerated. And if someone does make a complaint, then that complaint will be taken up seriously, and that there will be at least steps towards some form of redress of that situation. So this is something that there's still a gap with our act, with our bill, that really needs to be looked at before it goes for another reading and passed by the Parliament.
Yeah, that I think is really important, because if it's not instituted in black and white, or it's not going to be. I mean, a lot of things even in black and white doesn't work. But if it is not at all, then it is worse. Because if somebody needs redress, at least they have a source to go to. So that I think is really very important.
Yeah.
One of the examples, I think we can definitely look back last year in terms of a culture that has been perpetuated for so long and has not been addressed for so long. I think one of them was the period spot checks. Remember?
Yeah.
All these girls were complaining about how, either the teachers or the wardens or the seniors in school were coming out to make sure that, why is it that you cannot pray? Are you having your period? Are you really sure you're having your period? You have to show it to me. So it's already like, a girl's word is not to be trusted. That's the place that we're starting with. And it's very, very unhealthy, that, a girl is just not to be trusted when she says she's having a period. So, and then this practice, perpetuates until today. I mean, Ministry of Education says, it wants the schools and all to put a stop to it. But, to what extent has it really stopped? We don't know. And I think the other issue was also on the issue of the rape jokes that was being done by the teacher to the students as well. There's just something that's not okay for teachers to say.
No.
It's not okay to make these kinds of jokes within a classroom setting,
Yeah.
and making such explicit remarks about, it's okay for these persons and it's not okay to do it for these persons. I mean, that was something, if I would also, name it as a form of culture as well, because if adults have gone on for so long saying all these things and nobody is correcting him or her,
Yeah.
then that means it's already, embedded in the way they're thinking and speaking and manifesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's why a lot of times we talk about saying that there's been progress, as in stereotyping the women, or how you treat the men and women, or, the boys and girls, the bias that whether it's in the workplace or in school or even in a family which is thinking is the old school, because they think the girl means sometimes you really don't have to study, you don't have to go to university. The minute you finish and you reach a certain age, there's already pressure. That has not stopped, because even today's culture, I think I cannot say for other races, but in the Indian community, it's very much still a pressure, even for today's children, who are turning 24. It's like, okay, you already, find someone and get married, settled, and then have a child. It's like you're a machine that's born to just, populate your country, and if you don't have a child within the first year, immediately the hand points at you, the woman, you're at fault, the man is okay. So all these mindsets, yes, it's been changing. I have seen even men who think differently. I've seen them, sometimes the men are supporting more the women should change, or their wives should go out there and do things and be independent herself, and sometimes the woman holds herself back, so we wouldn't say okay, all the men are bad, the women are all good, or we can't say that, right? So we all agree that basically it's not like that, because I have my husband who's totally supportive of me. He's like, go out there and achieve and do what you like, and you be yourself. Don't look at me and ask me what I should do, and so you have men like that who kind of empower you, who embrace you for who you are. So, but it's because it's International Women's Day today. That's why we are giving the emphasis to women, but we at the same time, we are talking about basically the men and the women growing together at one race, because we are the same. Because we've talked about, I think earlier, Bala also mentioned, we are biologically different, which I say all the time, but I didn't say, I tell them not the strength, but the way we are biologically different, because how we look and our body structure and the man's body structure is different. And we are both, there for a different purpose. So, in the sense, but in terms of intelligence, in terms of output, in terms of what we can do, and a strength as well. Today also we can carry things as well, and we can stand there and fight if we need to fight, And women and men, you don't see that kind of difference, but at the same time, the progress has been made, but is that really enough for us today? It's not. I don't know, in our generation, right, today, Emmy, Rozana, yours, mine, our generation, I don't know whether we will see the change. But this discussion and this, affirmation and this pushing happens today. So the next generation tomorrow does change. And we see a change where all this nonsense that's happening today about, even about schools today, about whether the girls are having their period, show it to me to, we want to see a proof. This is ridiculous. This is like regression. Don't you agree? This is not progression. This is regression, in this country, for example. We're talking about what happened in Malaysia. This is a regression. And forcing women to do something that they don't want to do, and just because they are women, is wrong. I mean, that's the stand that I would take. So if we don't talk about this, we don't discuss it, then it never gets tabled anywhere, and then the change does not happen.
Correct. I don't think we should continue putting people in boxes. Boys
Yes.
do this, girls should do this.
Yes.
And then girls are not going to male-dominated fields. Girls don't have the strength to do this. Strange but true, you will find women in every field now and
Yes.
doing well. So
Yeah.
personally, I think what they need are opportunities.
Yes.
You give them the opportunities, they will excel.
Yeah.
What they need is an opportunity. We're not forcing all women to go into male-dominated field. We're not. Do whatever you do, you want to do, and do it well. But you need to get that opportunity to be able to do it. If right from the beginning they say, sorry, Rozana, you're a woman, don't go out. Stay at home, look after your kids. If you want to work, okay, do a job that is office-based, then you have a problem. See? So I think one is to give opportunities to the women as well, to the women especially, I should say, so that they can go out and, and try and excel. And break the biases that have been formed, all the perceptions formed on the women.
Yeah, I think each one of us should do that. I think we are already into the beyond the time now, but let me see if there's any questions coming from our viewers. It's a Q&A session. I'm waiting. Do we have any questions? Okay, so this is from Natalie Narayanan. She's asking, how do you push for systematic change around ideas that are new or not that popular in an effort to break the bias? That's a good question. How do you push for systematic change around ideas that are new or not that popular in an effort to break the bias?
If I may, I think this is a very good question, and the way that because I'm guided by a framework of looking at a quadrant of what people can do at the individual level, and then the systemic change that needs to happen, as Natalie said. But when we look at systemic change, we also need to look at what's in the formal change that needs to happen, as well as the informal change that is more more cultural in nature, or more it's the kind of what are the narratives that are out there. So for example, the best example that I can give, which is not a new idea, is a very old idea, but we still haven't achieved it yet, is that issue, what Datin Sri said about child marriage, right? This is something that really shouldn't happen in our time anymore.
No.
And while it's important to push for systemic change in terms of the formal laws and policies, so we need to raise the minimum age of marriage. We need to ensure that that we have certain policies, because right now, for example, secondary school is not yet compulsory still in Malaysia. It's only primary school that's compulsory, right? So
Wow.
we need to change that policy. We need to change policies where secondary school is compulsory, and we keep children in schools for much longer than they are right now. And how else do we facilitate that? At the same time, we've also got to deal with it in terms of our surroundings and environment. So this is where the informal part of the systemic change needs to come in, where we need to talk to our elders, we need to talk to our communities and convince them that, child marriage really should not take place anymore, because it's actually very, very bad for the young couple in question, especially if it's a young girl whose physiology is not prepared to undergo such commitments, physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually, and all of that. I would say, Natalie, really there is no easy way to do this. You've really got to figure out the both spectrums of the formal change and the informal change, and they really need to go hand in hand, because one change at the formal sector, because I can share this from the experience of countries like Cambodia and Vietnam, where they have increased the minimum age of marriage. So in law, it is there, but in practice, because the society and the tribes, especially within the rural area, for them this is their way of life. For them this is the tradition that they must carry on. So that work about changing, changing the cultural beliefs is actually something that needs to go hand in hand with the formal change.
Yeah, correct. You also need to sensitize the communities for change, because if you want to bring in formal change, you also need to lobby. And people will not lobby, or society will not lobby, unless they know why they need to lobby. So that, like, even if you look at child bride, a lot of them think that, oh, the girl fell in love, she got married. It's really not really. Maybe, but not. That's not the point, or the most important. If you look at why they get married, a lot of them also to escape from poverty. The parents think that, they're not able to feed one more mouth, let her get married, and it's not my responsibility anymore. So which means we need to look at that source as well. If people are going to continue to be poor and they cannot cope even to support their own family, this is going to continue. It's a vicious cycle. So you need to look at the reasons why this happens. So you need to also find ways to change that. You can bring a law, but if you cannot mandate it, you cannot implement it. Legislations are fantastic unless legislations come alive. When they don't come alive, it doesn't mean anything either. So you need also to sensitize the community, and now you have got so many ways of doing it, your media campaigns or whatever, and if people do lobby, you may find some change.
Yeah, so we have to kind of look at that systematic change as, I think it's a community as a whole, because, when you see fathers basically, they're selling their daughters for this marriage because of poverty. So how do we lift them out of that poverty, And so I think we have to look at the systematic change as a whole. And then like you said, Rozana, I think there's no easy way out of it. Basically, it's a wholesome change, and it needs the political will, at the same time the will of the people, in order for us to achieve such a change. So I can see in Bala's expression there. It's
what's going through my mind is, like, even if you look at budget allocation itself, where is the bulk of the budget going? So you can go into another discussion on this.
Yes. So, I think we kind of need that. Okay. This is from Charlene. Do you have tips to share on how men can unlearn toxic patriarchal traits, especially in the workplace?
This is just a suggestion that I have. I think, it goes back to that part about changing the culture, right? And I think, you've got to, the best way forward, I think, is to lobby the management, to change the culture within the organization through provision of, trainings, through workshops, through unpacking all of this, because people have got to be convinced. I mean, people need to understand why toxic patriarchal traits are a disadvantage, and to whom it's a disadvantage to. I think trying to kind of like engage with this one-on-one is useful, but you're only changing the mindset of one person. If you can get your management team on board to look at this whole thing holistically, then you are more able to kind of like change the mindset of the organization rather than just one person. So
Actually, top down management, right?
That's true.
A lot of capacity building is done just to ensure productivity, competencies, and work base. But I think if they can focus on the attitude, how they work as a team, it'll also help to change.
Yeah, it all comes down to again the same thing we discussed before. It's the stereotype. They just what has been ingrained in them. Whether it's the men or women. We also talk about sometimes women talking about women because they kind of judge them from their dressing, and then they will say she could be an intelligent, smart girl. So what? Let her dress the way she wants. No, we will judge her from the way she's dressing, and therefore, okay, she's a girl who goes after the men. So we do have women who do the same thing as well. In that sense. So it's the same thing of the men stereotyping in the sense that it's that time of the month. These are some of the things that are used. I mean, she's too emotional, but I remember either it was Rozana or Amy saying that these are it's not men or women. Sometimes men are also very emotional in the workplace. I've seen them raise voice. I've seen them get emotional. So, but when a woman tries to make a point and they say, why are you emotional? And so I've seen many times, and I have to say sometimes it's like, I'm not emotional, I'm passionate. That's a difference, when you say it and you have all this expression and you say, why are you emotional? Like, who's emotional? I am passionate about what I do, my community work. I want to change the life of these girls. I want to empower them. That's my passion. So this is my passion. It's not emotion. So these are things that basically ingrained in us, so structure of the company itself. And I agree with Amy Bala, it's top down. When it comes to this, it's top down because it can never be bottom up. So I think that's the change that has to happen. Okay, Joanna, how can we calculate the positive impact of having women in the organization and in leadership roles? So how can we calculate positive impact of having women in the organization and in leadership roles?
Amy, go ahead.
It's more like what's the impact of, I think it's more like an impact of having women in the organization in leadership roles.
Okay, I look at an organization like a jigsaw puzzle, where everyone has their own role and end of the day it will complete. So if you look at them as this woman and that man and this person, you look at them as individuals with their skills, relevant skills to contribute to the organization. I don't think you will have to start calculating what the women contributed and what the men contributed. It has to be something that is a team, right?
Yeah.
Rozana?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can only speak from my own working experience, and I really have the benefit of being in an organization. We have men, there's 12 of us, and we have 2 men, there's 10 women altogether. And the thing is, while, all these things about, I guess the best way is to kind of look at the annual performance and see, to what extent, women have been part of decision making in projects, contributing towards, team making discussions. And then, you'll be able to see the impact of having women in decision making, and what kind of impact it has on the company when you're comparing that on an annual basis. I think if you're in a profit-making company, I guess, I don't know, your KPIs and I guess maybe to a certain extent, the profit that's being made, or the cost that is being reduced. I mean, some of all of this, I mean, it's difficult because if you're profit making, you're kind of like tying it to the monetary side of things, right? But if you're in an organization that you're looking at, I don't know, the number of people that you've been able to reach, the kinds of success in the projects that you've been able to achieve. So all those calculations, I think it's also a good thing to figure out together, like, how will we calculate the impact? Then, it becomes much more of a collective, what do you call this? Everybody can have a say in terms of how they're assessing the impact rather than one person deciding for all.
Yeah, because, in reality, they talk about women are half the population, if not more, of the world. So they talk about why leave them behind and think only, just use the other half, because they can equally contribute. There's two aspects that I see, because, I see our corporate structure and the environment and a lot of things that I hear sometimes. If it's a manager, or for a female, marriageable age, then it's immediately they think, once she gets married, she's going to have a child, then, she wants to spend time. So that means taking away her time, from the office. And if she's kind of holding an important position, then she's not going to be able to divide that time between an office and house. And I think that's an unfair box to put her in, because I think I think if you're married and if you're a mother most of the time, and if you take on that job, the responsibilities that comes with it. And most of the time you have to figure out a way. If you want to climb that ladder, then you always figure out a way to divide time and balance. And I think that I feel that she should be allowed to make that decision. The organization shouldn't make that decision. So I've sometimes seen at a top level, they don't make that decision. Simply, they make the decision for her, and they just don't promote, or they don't do anything simply because she's a woman, not because she's not capable. That is, at least I can understand. Okay, if you're not performing, then I can understand. But it's not that. It's because she's a woman. She's going to get married. So they are already predicting her future, and they stop. And that culture has to change. That's totally totally biased. Because if it's a man, oh no, he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't do. He's in his own box, so he can, he has all the time in the world. I think we have to stop doing that. And there's another question, long question, from Kartika. What can faith-based organizations do to address gender equality in religious scriptures? Many of the religious thoughts ask women and girls to be submissive to men. This is very sensitive. For example, in the Indian culture, women need to fall on their husband's feet, making them to be submissive to their husbands just by gesture. What can we do to stop this? Amy, Bala, I don't know.
This is culture.
I am not. I'm not sure whether it's an.
No, it's not.
Rozana,
it is created by a particular group of people, and they want things to be done this way. Because if you look, even in traditionally, even in the Indian traditions, the men and women complement each other. Yeah. It's not submissive, you fall on my feet. Normally, they fall on the feet of the elders, yes, because of respect and the blessing. Yes. But wives falling on the feet, I didn't think this existed even. I don't know.
Yeah, she says that it's there in the Indian culture. I'm not sure whether that's a forced tradition, because I think in Malaysia, I've not heard of it. The Indian women are falling on the men's feet. They'll probably, I've never heard it. Like I said, like Amy Bala said, I think they do that to the elders out of respect. And also, when that relationships are formed between a husband and wife, but that is done on a person to person, and their relationship basis. That has nothing to kind of do with the culture or religion. So I'm kind of surprised also with that. There's another question from Shliki saying, what do you think about criticism of either gender? Can it be a reason to dominate the right to autonomy in personal or professional life of a person. I mean, what do you think about favoritism or favorism of either gender? So can it be a reason to dominate the right to autonomy in personal or professional relationship? Life of a person. That means a person thinks, like women are the best or probably the men are the best or something like that. I mean, I think anyone wants to answer that question?
I think Rozana and I have been reiterating the fact that you don't have any kind of favoritism
Exactly.
or be impartial to
I know.
one.
I think that's what I totally agree with you, because I think whenever I come on and we have this, the FP live sessions on an International Women Day, and also I speak to my staff, I reiterate very clearly, when I give the emphasis to women, that doesn't mean I say, okay, leave the men out of it, and this is not about the men or the women. I think you agree with me, this is not about which gender is better than the other, or which gender can do better, and this is not about, okay, the subject matter is, break the bias to achieve gender equality for a sustainable tomorrow. Now, the reason, it's already there. The fact that we want to break the bias, we want to come together as one race, the man and the woman, to be one, to share that equal partnership, whether you're a husband and wife, whether you're brother and sister, whether you're a friend to each other, the fact is, we have to learn to respect each other's strength and weaknesses, and say that, and have empathy for one another, have love for one another, have compassion for one another, and have tolerance for one another. I think that is a sustainable tomorrow, I believe. I mean, for me, I see it as us coming together as one, and living together without having these differences, without stereotyping ourselves, and in the sense that respecting each other. What do you believe? Kind of like the last words before we close, Rozana.
Yeah.
What do you believe from this whole conversation and the topic itself?
Yeah, I think, the choice, it really is a choice. You're making a choice to believe in gender equality, and it's not about favoring one gender over another. It's really, how do we ensure that we are all able to live harmoniously and justly, and treat one another with respect, and with, treat, and with justice towards one another. I just also want to share this very interesting personal experience, because my mother is very clearly biased towards the male members. Okay, so there's three of us, my sister and I, my elder sister, then we have my brother, and then me, right? And then my mother, in fact, also favors my husband over me, So it's like anything, like he'll come to the house, she will offer him all the nice food to eat over my sister-in-law who's pregnant. I'm like, why are you doing this? It's like, but I have to say that, when you start favoring one gender over another, it will ultimately put unnecessary, unjust expectations over the person that you're not favoring. So, for example, at one point, I decided to stop work because I said I wanted to spend time with my children before they go on to primary school. So this is just some catching up, bonding time. And my husband was like, okay, fine. However, you want to work part-time or not work and all that's, your choice. But my mother was upset because she says that I am a burden to my husband by not working. You're making life difficult for him. He's not complaining, but to her eyes, I am not, pulling up my end of, the deal by just making myself like, and I'm not making ridiculous demands out of him, like, saya nak rumah besar dan ikut besar or whatever. So So then at the same time, she also realized that with me not working, that she's also no longer getting some pocket money from me lah.
Yeah.
Then she's also kind of like, when are you going to start working again? Because at one point when I wasn't working, it was the argument about I am a burden to my husband, right? But at the same time also, it's like, if you're not working, I'm also not getting something out of it. So yeah, but the good thing about my mother is that I can call out to her and have a conversation, and I don't hold it against her. She said,
Yeah.
"Oh, Lotila,"
Yeah. Yeah.
So it becomes kind of like something. I will just say, that's why you favor him more over me and all of that, right? But I can imagine in some families, this can become quite contentious, because then you are actually going to be allocating resources to one gender over the other.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, savings for education is going to be prioritized to one gender over the other. So
Yeah.
then that's when you can have, that's when that whole relationship becomes a little bit sour, because there's unequal treatment and all of that. So we really have got to be careful, because when we favor one gender over the other, regardless, whether we favor girls over boys or whatever,
Yes.
other one is going to feel it's not fair to.
Okay. Yes, true. It's I kind of my mother, in a way, I mean, she's a very strong personality, and I come a family of 3 as well, like you, and I'm in the middle. So I say I'm like that Indian drum. Have you seen, like, say, my brother on one side and my sister on the other side, and I'm in the center. So you have an eldest child, okay, the son. So he's the apple of mother's eye, and then my sister, the youngest, who's so sayang, and I'm in the middle. I don't know why I'm there. So I used to get very confused. And then and my mother, of course, always. So, but she's a very strong personality. She speaks her mind. She's loud, and I'm like that. I mean, I will say, whatever it's in my heart, whatever I feel, I will say. It's like no bars, okay, no bar holes. That's me, and my sister is like that, and we have become like her. But she's always like, my brother is always right. So when a sibling squabbles comes, she's like, okay, your brother is always right, and you guys. So like you said, I think they are older generation, and we can't change their mindset, but our mindsets can change, so that our next generation can learn, okay, this is not how it is. So what we realized only 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, or whatever, when we were in our teens or early 20s, what we realized, children today born, like, they can realize when they are like 5-6 year old, and the girls and the boys can realize and respect each other. I mean, that's what we want. We want that to start from a very early young age. Amy,
Right.
Bala, what do you think of this?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, what you said, I mean, the generations in the past, in their favor, the sons or the females, and we have been the beneficiary of that disparity. I don't think we should go and perpetuate it.
Nah.
So we need to change that. We cannot blame them for the way of thinking, but for the next generation, we need to change. So
Yes.
change the perception. Try and break the biases. Okay, make the male and the female child feel each is important, each can contribute, each has got strengths and also challenges. They're not all strengths,
No.
So if they have this confidence and they know they're motivated to do well, give them all opportunities. At the
Yes.
moment, again, because of barriers, if there is a one vacancy available, give it to the man, he has to support his family. But for all he may disappear the next month, and the family is left abandoned. So look for the best candidate. If it is a woman, why not? So we need to give more opportunities to the best, not the gender. I think you need to look at that.
Yes, I agree. So there's a question coming. Okay. From Anita. Questions we could ask ourselves to break the bias internally when it comes to doing the lion's share of the housework. Do we give our partners, children, or housemates the opportunity, or are we identified with being the superwoman? Interesting question.
You know, a home.
I agree. I agree. We should really ask ourselves.
Yeah, in a home and a family,
Yeah.
everyone in the family a member.
Yes.
So you don't become one superwoman and do everything.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way. Everybody, even the children, have got their chores to do. They're contributing to the family, to the family. So if you're talking
Yes.
about well-being of the family, basic the house, the cleanliness, or maybe the mothers take on the role of cooking for until a certain age. After that, the children can do as well. So
Small things they can do, isn't it, Bala? Like, I think children are teenagers. I mean, come on, toast and a bread and fry an egg and put butter and eat. I mean, or make a Maggie mee. I mean, that's not
Maggi mee.
rocket science, I mean,
Yeah.
I think a family
No.
unit should work as a family unit.
You need to work as a family.
Yeah,
No Iron Lady and Superwoman and Superwoman.
Yeah,
and
I
Superman.
no superwoman. No, Anita, I don't think so. We all agree that, we shouldn't be the superwoman. And that's where we take on more than what we can chew, because, we are kind of, sometimes I think we are like that, women are in that sense, okay, let me do it. Okay, let me do it. And we
But
take on.
sometimes, Datin, sometimes there's a negative impact, If you
Yes.
think you're a superwoman, you want to do
Yes.
everything,
Yeah.
then you get stressed out, you get
Yes.
tired, you get
Correct.
argumentative.
Yes.
In the end, you start scolding everybody around.
Yes.
You upset the husband, you upset your kids. You put in rules that are too difficult to follow. And
Agreed.
it's not contributing to the harmony in the family,
True.
Then
I
you become-
realize that myself sometimes, I do the same things in the house, and now I realize, I said, this is not worth it. This is not worth my anxiety, my stress, and my getting excited. If things don't get done, fine. If it's not today, it will get done tomorrow. I mean, what's the rush now? It's not like your roof is coming down. So, it can be handled. So, I agree. It's unnecessary stress, depression. I think some women go to the fact of even suicidal ideas and all this, simply because for something that is not so relevant at all,
And the family well-being suffers. Children are not happy, husband is not happy, so
End of the day, I think women, kind of, you do end up coming as a centerpiece of the house, which is not the stress of it, but the beauty of it, is held by the woman, So I think if you have to be balanced and you have to be focused, so I think it's very important that each and every one of us have to understand our role in what we need to do to break the bias in our lives, per se, in each and every one of us. And also, whether it's in our life or whether it's in people that we come in contact with, or like, Amy, Bala and me and Rozana, we are very much connected with the communities. And, what we do, the work, the impact of the girls, the boys, the youth, the parents, the community as a whole as well. We need to keep, I think, the work that we do, I think there's so much of responsibility in us to impart the value of why it is important to look at everybody as equal, and give everyone that equal opportunity. So we, especially also in Malaysia, as as a multicultural society, we can grow and break all these barriers and live as a one community, as a one nation. Don't you agree with me? With that, I think today she's a writer and an activist as well. Her name is Chimamanda Adichie. I think she calls herself, she's a feminist. I think if you have read her books, she says, feminism for me has been about unlearning and learning. I think that has been all the women itself. I think it's not just
all of us learning.
Yes, yes, learning and unlearning, questioning and reflecting. It is a process, a lifelong journey, a way of looking clear-eyed at the world as it is, while imagining the world as it should be. And not only imagining, but making changes, big and small, to ensure that our daughters inherit a world more just than their mothers inherited. And I thought that was a powerful message from her. So ending with that message would be something that everybody who's kind of online with us today, thank you to our audience, and thank you so much, to my speakers, to my, today. Thank you so much for your valuable input, Amy and Rozana. It was really nice hearing the, everything that you said was from a very positive objective. Nothing that you said I thought was either it's negative or to putting down, the other gender. So if anything at all today, that everyone who is connected today and listening to both of you and to me moderating, that is what I want them to take it back, is to say that there is no difference between the two. So I think what we are trying to see is to bring strength in both genders, and and by that we break the bias. Thank you so much for your time today, and it's raining cats and dogs, so take care of yourself, and thank you so much and have a good evening.